So before we get into our next unit on circles, I want to review a little bit of algebra that you did last year, a little bit that goes in with factoring. So we're going to need to go back and look at some of that some. So I really need you to do this. Make sure you do the homework problems. They're going to be on an EdPuzzle after you're done with this. So let's take a look at the work. Remember, you can print out these worksheets. That way you'll have it there, and also on the worksheets will be the homework page. So here we go with the work. So we're reviewing what's called completing the square, and it's all based on a perfect square trinomial. Now remember, a trinomial is a three-numbered object, okay? So a perfect square trinomial is a trinomial that can be factored into a binomial squared. Okay? That's what a perfect square trinomial is. This is a binomial squared. Two terms squared. So if we were to multiply this out and expand this, remember, to expand that, you have to multiply it by itself. And then many people call this FOIL, but we're going to distribute. I get x squared minus 3x minus another 3x plus 9, and then combine my like terms. This is a perfect square trinomial. And every perfect square trinomial will factor to be that. In fact, if you notice a perfect square trinomial, factoring it is really easy, because the last term here, if I take the square root of that, that gives me my number here. The square root of that gives me the number here. The sign in the middle is the same sign as the b term here. Okay, so let's take that same idea and let's generalize it. So if I were to take any binomial squared, I could FOIL that out. So let's double this here. There we go. So that's x squared plus xp plus another xp plus p squared, which then gives me x squared plus, I'm going to switch the order around because I like having my x's later, plus p squared. Notice this term here. This is what we're going for. Okay? It takes the square root of this last term, so square root of p squared is p, and multiplies it by 2. That's what we're looking at. Okay? So in general terms, every perfect square trinomial will be in the form that looks like this, where b is really this term. It's actually just both of these together, so it's actually a times c, the square root of that, times 2. But more often than not, we're not worried about finding b. What we're trying to do is find c. So I'm going to take this and solve for c. That means I'm going to divide by 2, and then I'm going to square it. Now here's what's going to help us out. If a equals 1, okay? Well, if a equals 1, 1 times c is just c. So at that point, this equation just becomes, oops, I forgot to square it, b minus 2 squared equals c. And this is what we're going to be using, because this allows me to actually complete the square. Okay? And that means what we're doing is we're finding the last term to make my equation be a perfect square trinomial. Now, why do we want to do this? Well, let's talk about what factoring allowed us to do. Remember good old factoring. Oh, yay, factor this. 2 sets of parentheses, where the first 2 terms have to multiply to make that. The last 2 terms have to multiply to make 6. So if I'm multiplying to make 6, that's really my only choices. So I'm going to choose 2 and 3. And if I use a negative 2 and a positive 3, always check that middle term. Negative 2x, positive 3x gives me 1x. I usually do this in my head, but that lets me know that, yes, this is my factor. Now, in your algebra class, you'd then set each of these equal to 0 and solve, but frankly, I don't care about that. Okay? What we're interested in is actually getting the factoring done. So let's look at a problem that's more complicated, because factoring that is easy. But what if it doesn't factor so easily. X squared, no problem, x and x. But 3, the only thing that multiplies to make 3 is 3 and 1, and I'm not going to get a 6 that way. So what we can do is we can complete the square. This is forcing one side of our equation to be a perfect square trinomial. Okay? So, 4 steps to this. Step 1, get all the variable terms on one side and all the constants on the other side. So here I've got a 3 on this side, so I'm actually going to subtract 3 on both sides. That's going to give me x squared plus 6x equals negative 3. Okay, that was easy. Step 2, make sure that your leading coefficient is 1. Here my leading coefficient is 1. So in this case, it is. Yay. Okay, so I don't have to worry about that. We'll see a problem which we will worry about that, but for now, not a problem. Next step, find my new C term. So I've got, so far, this going on. I put parentheses around that, sort of grouped it together. What I want to do is I want to use this equation to find my missing C term and complete this perfect square trinomial. So C equals, well, my B term is 6. So that's going to be 6 over 2 squared. 6 over 2 is 3. 3 squared is 9. So I'm going to add 9 here. But if I add 9 to one side of the equation, I have to add 9 to the other side. Now I have my perfect square trinomial. That I can factor. Remember we said at the beginning, x square root of x is x, square root of 9 is 3. My middle term will follow that. And over here, I get 6. So that's what we mean by completing the square. How did I get to here so fast? Well, the step I didn't show is this really factors like that. X plus 3, x plus 3. But that becomes x plus 3 squared. Okay? So I kind of skip this and go, hey, because I made that a perfect square trinomial, I can do this easier. So once we got that, you could solve for x, and that's all we got. But hey, for right now, we don't care. Here is what we want. So let's try that again. Let's shoot another one of those. Let's do this one. Step 1, move to 24. Okay. Step 2, complete the square. Right now, decide what that square should be. Okay, hopefully you went 10 over 2 squared gives me 25. So that squared term, that missing term, should be a 25. Okay, so that gives me x plus 5 squared equals 1. Excellent. Try the next one. See if you can do this problem. Okay, go ahead and try to get it into this form and type your answer. Use the up caret to be your squared, just like we do. So your answer is going to be look like, if I was typing my last answer, it would look like that. Okay, so figure this and type your answer. So going back, x squared plus 6x equals 11. I leave some space to complete my square. Half of 6 is 3. 3 squared is 9. So now I can go, great. My answer is x plus 3 squared equals 20. Okay, let's try one that's got more excitement to it. Another example. So I'm going to move the 7 over. 2x squared minus 8x equals, and when I add 7 to both sides, I'll get 5. Here's a problem. Notice that this time I got a 2 here. So I need to fix that. So to fix that, what we're going to do is I'm going to divide everything in this equation by 2. Might lead us to some fractions, but that's okay. 2 divided by 2 gives me x squared. 8 divided by 2 gives me 4x. And then 5 divided by 2 is just 5 over 2. Now we're ready to complete the square. What number would I use to complete the square? Hopefully, you said half of 4 is 2. 2 squared is 4. So I add that to both sides. So now when I write my answer, x minus 2 squared. And we've got to add these fractions. So remember, you need a common denominator. So 4 over 1, multiply it by 2, so that's 8. So 5 plus 8 is 13 over 2. Okay. Not too bad. Your turn. try this one. Okay, so hopefully your first step, move your 5 over. Now we need to complete this. Oh, now we need to get rid of the 2. So I'll divide everything by 2. That's going to give me x squared minus 2x equals 1/2. Now complete my square. Half of 2 is 1. 1 squared is 1. There we go. And now I can factor. X minus 1 squared equals 3/2. One more problem, then I'll set you on your own. Okay? So here we've got a problem. Notice that my x squareds and all are on the wrong side. So I need to move things around. Maybe I'll add or subtract the 8x on both sides and add 1 to both sides. Somehow I need to get things around. I like keeping my squared term positive. So 4x squared minus 8x minus 1 equals 0. And I'll move to 1 over. 4x squared minus 8x equals 1. You could have done that in one step if you wanted. Oops, got to get rid of the 4's. So here we go. So now I've got x squared minus 2x equals 1/4. Half of 2 is 1. 1 squared is still 1. And we factor. X minus 1 squared equals 5/4. Try the next problem. Last one. Hopefully you rearrange this to start off with 2x squared minus 6x equals, and when I move to 1, I should get a positive 1 on that side. Divide by the 2. So now I've got x squared minus 3x equals 1/2. Ooh, fractions, here we go. Because half of 3 is 3 over 2 squared. You know what? I'm going to go over here and do that. 3 over 2 squared gives me 9 over 4. Notice I didn't care about the negative, okay, because when you square it, it becomes positive, so we don't care. 9 over 4, 9 over 4. So that means this is going to factor x minus the square root of 9 over 4, 3 over 2. Make sure you square it up. And then this will be 2 over 4, so 2 plus 9 is 11 over 4. Okay, now you've got a problem set. You could either print out this problem set or look at it on the Edpuzzle as well, but that's what your job is tonight. Answer all these problems, and we're going to need this in class on Monday, so don't slack off on this. Okay? Have a good night. See you in class.